This whole event is meant to sponsor and help out nonprofit organizations that help our community and support the arts. If you would like to make a donation, just go to Virtual Arte's webpage, look for our community partners, and scroll down to the one you prefer and make a donation. This particular segment is being done in support of Self-Help Graphics and Art, an organization in East Los Angeles, which has been around for years and years supporting artists and members of the community. Well, today I am so excited because I have two marvelous Latino poets here with me today. We've got Jimmy Santiago Baca and Adrian Ernesto Cepeda. And we have a lot to cover, so let me just bring them both on, tell you a little bit about them. Adrian Ernesto Cepeda is the author of 3 poetry collections. His latest, La Belle Ajar, a collection of cento poems, which he's going to have to explain to me, inspired by Sylvia Plath's 1963 novel, published by Clash Books, was selected as one of the 5 books to watch out for in 2020 by Luna magazine. Adrian Ernesto was awarded Pasadena City College's Inscape magazine Poet Alumnus of the Year. And I have, as an extra special treat, Jimmy Santiago Baca is with us today. Jimmy in the house. Jimmy Santiago Baca was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He is the author of several books of poetry, a novel, a story collection, and the acclaimed memoir, A Place to Stand, which has been made into a feature documentary. His awards and honors include the National Endowment of Poetry Award, Pushcart Prize, Southwest Book Award, American Book Award, and the International Hispanic Heritage Award. Jimmy lives with his family in New Mexico. And Jimmy has done so much and covered so much territory that half of it is out of this bio. I met Jimmy, by the way, welcome guys. Let's have Jimmy and Adrian give him a good welcome. How are you guys doing? How is everybody today? Jimmy?
I'm good.
Yeah? How's New Mexico?
Hot.
How are you surviving the whole lockdown thing?
I like it. I mean, yeah, I like it. It's external discipline. It allows me to read more books and it hasn't infringed upon my duties as a writer, as a poet. I mean, it's enhanced them, in fact.
Ah.
I think the whole world's getting to know what it's like to be a writer.
I think you have something there, you know. I mean, it's like, you know, we look for silver linings in all clouds, you know, but I know it's been our experience that this sort of forced confinement, in a way, has created a manifestation of art, you know, in other forms. It's wonderful that we're exploring this medium right now and having an opportunity. This whole festival that we're doing has been born out of this lockdown that we're all going through right now. So I totally understand what you're saying. What about you, Adrian? How are you surviving in the lockdown?
Yeah, it's pretty much just the same thing that Jimmy said. Basically, since I'm a poet and a writer, I usually spend my time at home. So basically what I've been doing is just doing my usual routine every day, is waking up early in the morning and writing my poems and just basically keeping a routine. So basically, despite not having to drive to work, basically it's just like Jimmy said, everybody's living the life of a writer. And so we're trying to stay positive. And I'm reading a whole lot of books. I'm loving Jimmy's new book. As you can see, I have so many of these highlights on it. It's fantastic. It's so inspiring. I have to stop, and it inspires me so much that I have to write. I love the book.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's terrific. You know, it's so much fun to actually have both of you here on this call, because I know you from different worlds, you know. And Jimmy, of course, I know from this seminal film that we both worked on, let's say 30 years ago or something, called Blood In, Blood Out, which Jimmy was responsible for the rich, rich cultural writing that came to that book. And in fact, over the years, because that film has developed such a huge following, over the years, people have come up to me and they go, "Oh, I loved you in the movie. The movie was so terrific and everything." And I always go out of my way to say, "Yeah," but because they quote lines, you know, and they go, "Where did you get that line?" Which, and I said, "Jimmy Santiago Baca. He's the guy that wrote all of that." You know, and part of the fun of this little conversation we're having here is that I met Adrian about a year and a half ago or something when I went to a book signing of his for his new book. And, you know, I went there with my wife, Rochelle, who I later found out was a fellow alum, you know, at Antioch, the MFA writing program with Adrian. And no, that's all wrong.
No, only the book signing part is wrong.
Oh, only the book signing. Okay, fine. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. You see, this is what happens when you're me. You have la jefa right over there, wagging fingers and stuff. Anyway, the story is that I went to the book signing and we stood in line dutifully waiting. What? Okay, never mind.
No, you met Adrian at my graduation from MFA from Antioch, where Jimmy was the keynote speaker.
Yes.
You never went to any of his book signings.
Goodbye. Goodbye. The point is that we have mutual admiration society going on here, and it's so exciting. It's so terrific. It's true. You went to, Adrian went to Antioch with Rochelle.
Yes.
Jimmy was the keynote speaker at the graduation. And that's the DNA of this whole relationship here, you know. So I'm very, very pleased to bring the two of you guys together again so we can have this wonderful conversation. All right, then. Have we passed the formalities?
Yeah.
All right. So Jimmy, talk to us. You have this new book that you have just published, which Adrian has it. I don't have it. I have old stuff from Jimmy. It's all good. Jimmy is such a prolific writer, as well as being such a talented fellow. You know, there it is. All right, Laughing in the Light by Jimmy Santiago Baca. So Jimmy, tell us a little bit about this latest book and, you know, how you are doing with that.
Well, listen, I wanted to say thank you to Adrian and to you because I normally don't do this, but I admire, you're two of the most, I mean, really, after reading Adrian's book, I was mesmerized by the catchphrases in the verses for a couple of days. They kept echoing in my brain after I read it. And I have so much admiration for you, Adrian, and your writing and the integrity of it, you know. And then Popeye, today when I was really exhausted and tired, I thought about you for a couple hours thinking, wow, what a great role for Popeye. It was one of the most evilest roles and that you could just luxuriate in, and you played it the way a rose plays the spring. You know? I mean, you just fulfilled it, you know? So, and I wasn't even supposed to be on here. It was through your generosity, Adrian, and yours, Carlos. You both asked if you would let me come on. And so I just want to say thank you because, you know, when you're with writers and actors, that's almost unheard of, that type of generosity. It's a me culture. So when you asked me to come on, Carlos, it just showed the breadth and width of your heart. And Adrian, likewise with you, when you asked me, you said, sure, I would love to have him on. You're giving me space that really belongs to you all. But you're also doing something revolutionary in the art world. And it could be an effect of the COVID-19. I'm not sure. Because when you put people in a place where they have to think, it can cause mayhem, assassinations. It can cause people in Michigan to get an M16 and go to the go to the Capitol and demand, I don't want to even go, okay, all right, so I have a rule, okay. So it makes people do weird things. In your case, it made you do a beautiful overture. And I want to start this out by saying thank you for letting me have this space with you.
Oh my gosh. No question about it, my friend. I mean, we are just so pleased to have you as part of our space and so honored because you are such a genuine American talent and, a great poet. I love your stuff. I've loved knowing you throughout all the years. And of course, we had to make space in here for you.
I have to say, Popeye, that I consider you to be the most literary of all the blood in, blood out actors. Uh-huh. You're the most literary of the bunch. So it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jimmy. And having said that, why don't we get all literary here,
I'd like to hear Adrian.
Yeah, the heck with that. We have our little space here and let's do some art. I understand that you are going to gift us with a reading from one of your pieces.
Well, I am, but I'd rather hear Adrian, if that's okay, because
you're both going to read.
Okay. Oh, well, yeah. Okay, fine. I'll read. Okay.
Well, do you want Adrian to go first? It's all easy peasy here, loosey goosey.
I just think that Adrian's work echoes with the breadth and width of a prophetical grounding point.
All right.
Okay. In the sense that I think it's going to be the type of literature in 50 years where it will be influencing a lot of other people. Because he's like Adrian is on a bizarre path of confronting the unknown in a lot of ways.
Adrian, after that build-up, I think, Jimmy has passed the baton to you. So somebody got to go first. So why don't we hear from you, my friend?
Yes, I'll go first. Thank you, Jimmy. You've been an inspiration, meeting you and Carlos during the MFA graduation. That was such a highlight of a day. And Carlos, first of all, I need to thank you because you were so kind to my mom. She passed away, and she spoke so highly of you that day. And she'd always, so thank you so much for being so kind to my mother. She passed away. And one of the pieces the first piece I'm going to read was I actually just came back before this whole quarantine happened. I was at the AWP conference in San Antonio. And I actually had my own, seminar, and I actually, for Latinx poets, and I had a panel. And so I was the one who actually was a moderator. So the piece I'm going to read was something that I read at the conference, and it's called "When Their Eyes Are Scanning Me." Strangers often try sizing up my sound, trying to figure out what accent I speak, where I am from. Often they ask, "Are you Mexican, Dominican?" Their uneducated guesses always depend on the region in which they reside. While some of our shade are insulted when strangers or renewed acquaintances get guess wrong, I know it's annoying people try to identify your nationality by your skin tan or your accent. Although I understand their simmering frustrations, I just grin and say, "Soy Americano," but my parents hail from Bogota. They usually respond with an "ah," and they often inquire while asking if I know so-and-so. This is when I nod in the negative, and they often walk away. Still, this interaction is not just unique to me, myself, and others of my colorful kind. Although despite our different naciones, we all speak the same tongue. We should not let the borders and países divide us like spaces on a board game called Risk. Although we speak in different dialects, nosotros hablamos the same voz. We, mis amigos y amigos, are all invisibly tan. Often we are too light to be considered blanco and not dark enough to be included in the colorful shade of black. We are the forgotten ones until we are mistaken to be illegal dealers of drugs and bangers of gangs. We need to stop blaming one another and instead recite poems, tell more of our stories in novelas, TV, and películas like Blood In and Blood Out. We need to be seen on television, movie screens to show we are the makers and the creators. Universally picture yourself like everyone else. We love sharing our duende daydreams. One of the most amazing magical things of all the Latino poets, artists, and writers who we meet, who we all read and who inspire us, have in common is that poetry and the art of the written word gives us hope. Even during these days of self-isolation, we must realize collectively, la poesía is alive and can take us to a place of amor, esperanza, and belief that poetry might be able to one day change our world. We need to harness this chon feeling and try to support every Latinx poet that you love in our comunidad. We need to keep the spirit of la poesía alive. Por siempre, viva la poesía.
Whoa!
So one of the things, you know, that of course, because Jimmy wrote those beautiful, amazing lines in Blood In, Blood Out. When I was growing up in South Texas in the 90s, Blood In, Blood Out was legendary in our Latinx community. But back then, so when we saw it, it was the first time since then delivered when we saw our own voz, our lengua, our own fuerza on a silver screen. So, the line chon chon, I did some etymology research and realized I was doing research that in the South American religion, chonchones are supposed to be endowed with all the magical powers of and can only be seen by other kakus or by wizards that want this power. So when I added that, when I have that in the thing, it's basically we're all together in this event. We're all trying to capture the feeling, and it's amazing how a line that was in the movie from the 90s can go on and can be inspirational and go deeper than before. So I wanted to thank Jimmy and thank you for that movie. It's so inspiring, and for the poetry.
So amazing, you know, not only your poem and your language, but these last few insights that you've shared. Jimmy, I'm going to put you on the spot. Did you know about the chonchon, you know, relationship with the dioses and all that? Where did you get chonchon from?
I got chonchon from prison with all my homies. You know, chonchon was another slang word for give me the goods, you know? And so, yeah, I don't know. It's chonies is our boxer shorts in slang.
Yeah.
and then give me some chonchon is the word we use when we were kidding with each other about whatever, you know?
Yeah. No, that's fascinating.
I didn't know the etymology of that word, but I knew how we used it in prison. I was there for six and a half years. So I had a long time.
Yeah, Adrian, just to you know, piggyback on your poem for a little longer. I love some of the expressions that you used in there. First of all, I was struck by the ease of the flowing from one language to the other, you know, combining the two languages, which is something that I think is very, very organic to our cultures, you know, to the Latino culture, the bilingual culture. You know, it's like I grew up that way, combining both languages. It seemed to be like it was whatever word was first available to express the same thought. And I love the way that you wove them in and out of there. I particularly love the phrase, what did you say? The invisible brown in all of us. What was that?
We're all invisibly tan.
We're all invisibly tan. You know,
yeah, that's actually that's the title of a poem that got published, I think, around one of the election days that I wrote, trying to describe how those of us from the Latinx community, I think it was Sandra Cisneros who said that the Latinx poets and writers are the illegal aliens of the publishing community. So basically that's the way that we are, not only in our everyday life, but also when we're on this path and journey I am, first starting to get published and getting my books published. I feel like Latinx poets and writers have a harder time, and I was trying to just basically reflect that, because we go through this every day. People are like, oh, where are you from? You know, but basically I was just trying to they reflect how I feel every day. And I wanted it to be at the end, something that I read at the end of the panel, which was a great experience to be able to do that. It was like life-changing. I spent a year we're working on that panel, and I actually made a reading list, which I shared with Jimmy, of all these amazing classic poets and new poets, because I kind of feel like we need to support each other. For me, our art is about sharing and uplifting everybody, and even promoting and helping our other artists. So that's my philosophy.
That's terrific, you know. And well, Jimmy, I think it's your turn to be on the spot since we've paid such homage to you. What do you got to share with us?
Well, I don't know if Adrian was reading from a piece of paper or not, but you got a hell of a memory, oh yeah. I mean, man, you recited that whole thing from memory?
No. I actually have it here. So.
Oh, I'm like, wow. You know, I was back in the day, I was on Russell Simmons' HBO Def Jam or whatever they call that.
Yes.
And I didn't know, you know, I was in New York at the time writing, and I got invited, so I went over there. But my two kids kept telling me on Def Jam, do you know who that guy is? I'm like, no. You know, the host, some really famous.
Russell Simmons.
Russell was the guys on stage who would come out.
Oh, okay.
And I told my kids, why would he switch sneakers every 10 minutes? Why would he go behind the stage and put on new sneakers? And I went by the stage and there was like 30 pair of sneakers, right? Brand new. And he would come back and they were like famous rappers. And my kids said, no, you don't even know you're an idiot, Poppy. You don't even know who these people are. And I'm like, no, I don't. And Deepak Chopra was back there trying to flirt with somebody and doing, you know, I was just like, I'm a poet, right? And so I went out there, 90% black audience, and I'm out there in my jacket, and he introduces me as the OG from Blood and Blood Out, the guy who wrote the movie, the guy who blah, 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 life is on, it's about his life. And I go outside and I look at the audience and I'm like, what's up? And then I reach in my jacket and I pull out a paper, and they all groan like no one ever saw anybody read from a paper.
Yeah.
Like this. And they're like, what's he doing, man? What's he doing? I was the first guy in 50 years ever to read from a poem from a paper, you know? Well, so it reminded me, I thought you were doing it by memory, because everybody on Def Jam they go out there and they'll do like 20 hours of memory poems, you know, which I really admire.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's what that reminded me of. Okay, you're going to read something, right?
Yes, I do.
All right, this is from the new book. This is a shout out to my boy, Isai Baca. I was going to say Isai Morales, pero no. Isai Baca es uno de los más grandes chingones en el mundo, con el corazón como el sol. El vato se avienta. Isai Baca, remember that name. You're going to hear it. Okay. I think he was the first one, my guru, to teach me how to levitate.
Really, Jimmy?
We'll get into that later, okay?
Okay.
I had to go to India to find a Chicano guru.
Okay. You know, I want to see some of that levitation, but maybe we'll do it off camera later.
Yeah, let's do it off camera.
Okay.
Okay, here's an excerpt that you picked out from the new book, Laughing in the Light. I wanted to write a companion book for Working in the Dark. And they gave me 30 days to write it. And I was having fun with it. I said, you know what? Let's just have fun like kids in the arroyo, just running in the water and splashing. Right, that's the first one. And then I wrote Laughing in the Light as a companion book for that one.
Okay.
Here's an excerpt from the new one. And this one's dedicated to Isai Baca. Thank God I am one of those still grubbing and fighting for respect. Still watching this once gorgeous flower turn stale and wither before me. And she gets meaner by the day, and I love her all the more because I understand what she's feeling. And I write my heart out trying to put her aging beauty in a poem. I want the wounds, not the willowy upper-class moochers. I want the eccentrics, the ones who are still trying to prove to themselves that they can write a poem because it trails them everywhere. Not the soundbite poets, not the botanist poet who pins the butterfly's wing down and encloses it in a glass case to show her visitors. I want the kid coming in who says, Órale, I've traveled 1,000 miles to show you this poem, Vato. Someone who has no patience for small talk, who is a loner, who makes a fool of himself, getting drunk because he's so frustrated by a poem. Someone who is feared and reviled by the established literati and regaled by common folks. Someone uncivilized and savage who never gets it right, but who stays up late making notes, who's never worn a suit, who has no lawyer look over his contracts, who writes and rewrites and rewrites what is already incredible. And if he only knew how amazing the poem is, he just threw away. That kind of poet we need now more than ever. Not the Italian shoe-wearing, showboating bore, all talking no balls. Give me the poet who paces at this imprisoned in a cell or something. The poet who smells and smokes and drinks too much. The poet who eats standing up. The poet whose shirt is moist from tears he cried while writing. The poet who makes all the mistakes and shows up to make even more. Who is always learning to be just a plain common human being, trying to catch up with the beauty that swirls all around him.
Wow.
Wow, Jimmy.
Awesome.
Wow. That's why you the man. Oh my God.
That's a composite sketch of Adrian.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Adrian?
Well, that's actually one of my favorite sections in the book. And I was hoping that he'd read that part. It's just so inspirational because it basically captures the passion. People always ask me, well, why do you write poetry? And it's just like, it's what I was born to do. It's a calling that I do every day. And it's how I understand the world and how I understand all my fears and all my anxieties. So he put that all beautifully on the page. And Jimmy, I love your book so much. It's so inspiring.
Can I ask you that? Thank you, Adrian. But can I ask you, and likewise with Popeye, with Carlos, how has language impacted your life? I mean, you were born as a small entity in the world, and you had candy and dogs. You went hunting with your uncles or fishing, or you had your moms and all these different things, her cooking and family gatherings. When was the time, if you can remember, when you knew that language had born itself on your tongue and shaped a part of you that wasn't there before? When did you know that language was your womb? That language was, that your mouth was the womb of words, and you gave birth to images and metaphors and expressions. When did you know that? At what age, and how did that occur? What were the circumstances?
Well, for me, since you can tell sometimes when I read, I have a speech impediment. So for me, every time I speak, I'm always aware of language because of that. Words, how they sound out of my mouth. So I've always been aware of language, and ever since I've been younger, books around our house, I've been so thanks to my dad, reading books. But when I was in elementary school, I had a teacher that had us read poetry and memorize it, and we would have to recite it every week. So that's how I learned about poetry. But I basically, it was, so I'd write poetry on and off in my undergrad, but I remember a moment right before I was accepted into Antioch, where I would go to these poetry readings, and I would try to get myself some more confidence to read, because I was always hesitant because I was afraid people were going to laugh at me because the way that I sometimes stammer to words. And I remember one day when I was reading my poem, it was like something happened. It was all magical, where my mouth and the words, it was kind of like mystical, and it changed my life. And I knew at that moment, because I was kind of lost at the time, this is what I was going to be. And at that moment, after I finished reading the poem, somebody came up to me and said, that was the greatest poem I ever heard in my life. And I realized that's what I need to be. That's the path I need to be going towards too. So it's something that started early in my life, but it's something that really I've been harnessing within the last 15 years. Really concentrating. I started to I started to basically study all these great artists, whether being actors, musicians, directors, and you name it. I wanted to figure out painters, what is it that they did to create their art, and I started following. I just starting the craft, working on my craft, writing every day, and that basically, and cut to 15 years later, I got my third book that came out last week, and so basically I've been just basically harnessing my voice, trying to harness my voice and my passion on the page.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you guys, for just really sharing something so personal and so intimate with us. I love your expression of finding language and poetry as becoming an organizing principle for your life, that it kind of gave you a key, a grounding meaning. And Jimmy, I know you, and I know a lot of your story and how language and poetry really changed your life, and how I'm going to tell the story badly, but it was at a time in your life when you were also, trying to find your way and everything. And at a certain point, you found yourself in a sort of confined situation. And somebody gave you, was it the Bible that you tell the story better, but that when you started reading, and trying to suss out the words and make sense of it, was when kind of like the light bulb went off for you, and you kind of like found your path that way as well. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. I was tutored by gangsters and saints, by killers and repentance. I had the best of both worlds. I mean, I was taught to write as real as I could by people who plunged a knife blade in someone's heart because of disrespect. And these were people that had history written on their bodies in the form of tattoos. Their entire body covered 300 years of Chicano history, Mexican history. They would point to their left arm and say, "Mira, here's where Pancho Villa rode. Here's Zapata over here." They would tell me that not to measure my poetry by the white template that little kids sitting in editorial offices in New York appraised a work by. Don't use that template, they said. You can't fault them for unwillful ignorance. It's not like they purposely became ignorant of our culture, but you can't compare what you're doing because you're holding a different compass. You have a different map. It's not theirs. Their compass and their map came along with Columbus and the Santa Maria boats and with Benjamin Franklin and those slave owners, those are the compasses that they have to gauge literature, to gauge acting. I remember in New York when I was at the Lower East Side, I was in Losaida. I was with Mikey and Lucky, and we had just petitioned Mayor Koch to open up the poet, what's that poetry place?
The Eureka.
Yeah, we helped open it up, right? So we were petitioning them to buy the building, right? And so Amiri Baraka came in, and he was reading it. And man, I never saw anybody levitate the people inside the room like he did with his reading. It was like boom, it was so cool. It was as if the water rose in its waves to become physical manifestations of drummers, tribal drummers, and the water started pounding, Yeah. And it was Amiri who was dancing and the water that was playing, right? And the water is the language, right? But anyway, I'll never forget there was a guy from London there who wrote a review of it. And all he did was compare it to Eurocentric English readers. And even though I'm a student of the Romantic poets, Byron, Shelley, Wordsworth, on and on, I was like, are you an idiot? This goes so beyond the English tradition. Yeah. But he was like, oh, it's just terrible the way they abuse the language. They done. I was like, right then and there, I knew I will never go to them to ask them if they like something. I will only go to them if they pay me to teach them. Right?
Right. Yeah.
And every time they ask me a question in New York, I'd be like, wait, are you paying me for this? And I say, well, you're an editor. You must have books here that can tell you that.
Yeah.
Right? And stuff like that. But so I learned in prison from the very beginning that you can use all the literary devices you want. You can use all the technical wizardry you want. But the one thing you can't use unless you yourself summon it from the spirit world, and that's the disembowelment of your metabolistic spiritual way that you be in the universe, the way body be. This is body be. You got to get that body be inside the words. That's what drives great poetry, is you inside the words dancing, inside the L's and the M and the consonant and the vowels. There's a little microscopic DNA person with your face in there doing tribal dances to make that word sound just the way you sound. So all I'm saying is that you can get all the literary devices you want, but unless it's driven by a deep inner force of your undying desire to express something so deep in your heart, it's just going to come out the same old thing that everybody else is doing.
I love that. You know, I can't let this go by, this hour, which is flying by, without, elbowing my way into this, because you guys have written such tremendous words that the actor in me, yearns for the spotlight. So I'm going to read some of your stuff, y'all, and then we can talk about it some more. I think I'm going to start with you, Jimmy, because I love that piece you wrote. And I mean, you were like, let's storm the barricades. Let's, up, down the establishment and all that. So I just want to keep that vibe going. And this is from Singing at the Gates, and this is a little bit of Jimmy through Carlos. This is something called Poets Can Still Have a Good Heart and have a past riddled with violence, a strong heart and have known addiction, a good heart and have known drunks and thieves. Do this, stand before a group of uppities, admit you know someone with AIDS, someone in prison, someone homeless, someone with mental illness, someone handicapped. It means, while most turn away their hearts, you face life. Use the sweet impulse of pulsing blood to live your life, not to live a lie. I'm in the garden this morning. Pleased the roses are so bountiful, awed by the lilac's treasure of fragrance, honeysuckle vines flourishing, climbing over each other up the wall towards sun rays, shivering with hungry freedom for the open road radiance. I don't remember my dreams this morning, but keep a journal next to my bed in case I do. Its empty pages welcome images, voices, sifted and tunneled through my waiting pen. I intend to compose poems of friends who died in recent years. I keep talking to them, hearing them in my head. Admirable acquaintances I wish to honor. Ones who stood, who labored against oppression, with heels dug in dirt against retreat. Voices, brilliant comments, subverting the dark.
Wow.
That was amazing. That's great.
All of us. I love that. I love that, the vitality in there, the energy, Jimmy. That's terrific. Adrian, like your mama used to say, ¿verdad?
Yes, sir.
Were you familiar with that piece of Jimmy's?
No, I know, but I can totally relate to it because every time, whenever I wake up in the morning, it's always trying to write down my dreams. And I don't know if this happens to Jimmy or not. Sometimes I come home, I compose and craft poems in my sleep, where I'm editing poems when I'm asleep. Does that ever happen to you? So when I wake up in the morning, I have to get that poem that I was writing in my dreams. I have to get it down. That actually happened this morning. So I'm dreaming and I'm writing a poem when I'm asleep. So that's something that's happened to me. Has it happened to you, Jimmy?
Yes, it happens to me quite often.
Yes.
That you wake up and it's there, right? Like,
yeah.
I have to write a poem about Carlos, you know?
Yeah.
Not really.
I have to tell you, Carlos, that was a marvelous reading you did. But that comes from years and years and years of two things. Number one, I don't know how many hours and months and years you put into learning how to speak, you know, the way you just did. I don't even know what that word is for that. Elocution, articulation. I don't know what it is in the art world. I mean, in the acting world. But the other thing was I was leaving a reading once, and a very wealthy woman stopped me on the way out and said, "I really admire your work, but do you have to write about that stuff, the dirty things? Do you need to write about that? Can you just like write about clean people and little girls on grasses playing with their dolls? Do you have to write about them, you know, the dirty stuff like being kidnapped and being domestic abuse? And do you have to do that? I almost left because you did that. So the whole idea is, and it's two schools. The one school is literature that pleases the sensibilities. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And the other literature, which has been demonized because just like people in prison have been demonized when there's simply people that had emotional problems and needed to do drugs, like in other places all over the world, right? They're not called criminals. They're called people who need help because they're emotionally traumatized for one reason or another. But the other literature, so many people are afraid to get into it. And you just did. And you did it unafraid. And you did it defiantly you did it with what I call defiant love. And there's those two types of literature. The pleasers and the don't upset and everything's okay. And then there's I believe literature was made to, is written to make you feel uncomfortable and to convey to you certain things. And the way you just read it showed not fear, but forgiveness and love for the human condition.
Well,
absolutely.
Jimmy, you and I have talked before, you know, over the years, and we have had some fascinating conversations about language and about poetry, you know, and about the performance of poetry. You know, that's why it's one of the reasons why when people ask me about Blood In, Blood Out, and they say, well, how did you get that character? How did you do that? I mean, my God. And I always turn it over to you. I say, you know, well, it comes from the words and perhaps that's part of my training as an actor and as a performer, is that there was a lot of emphasis placed on, well, basically poetry, on you know, how you read language, how you perform language. And I know you and I had a conversation once about how, from the performing side, finding the truth in the language is just simply, it's actually what you described about getting down in there, being that, I love what you said, that little duende down in the DNA, you know, and connecting with that, you know, and then what comes out is truthful. It's the same thing with the language. If the language is spot on and it's rich and it's endowed with all of that culture, that heritage, you know, that suffering, that pain, then the job of the interpreter, the one giving it voice, is simply to allow that language in and to let it flow and let it vibrate in the vessel that is the performer, and it will come out in a truthful manner, a powerful manner. I couldn't have read that poem that way if you hadn't written it that way.
Wow, that's an interesting collaboration between the actor and the writer. I was in Connecticut when I walked into a restaurant. I held the Wallace Stevens chair at Yale for a while, And I would go there and I go into this restaurant. Everybody at lunch had red ties and blue suits on. And they were all talking a language. It was English, but I didn't understand any of it because it was coded English. It was the language of Wall Street. And I didn't understand what they were saying, but they were talking to each other the way I'm talking to you right now. Half hour later, I'm in a prison. There's blacks, Latinos como Dominicanos, Puertorriqueños, gente asina, Colombianos, whites, different gangs, and everybody in the prison is signing. And everybody in the prison knows exactly what the black dude's saying to the white dude. No, in other words, it's a worldwide language that's non-exclusionary. So it took white capitalists to create a thing called insurance, to create a language that excluded others, so they could keep information to themselves. Now I could take those kids at the prison in Connecticut. I could take them to China or Africa or Peru or Panama and put them in a prison, and they would instantly be able to communicate the prison sign language. And they would immediately it's a world common language of the oppressed. Now, what's even more interesting than that is that in California, at Stanford, they did a study where they had some gangbangers signing to gorillas.
Really?
Gorillas got it. Gorillas got it when the gangbangers were like this.
Yeah.
The gorilla, for some reason, picked up the sandwich and handed it to him.
Wow. And
nobody knows how that took place. But it shows you when language is inclusive, it can carry miracles within it. You know, with the world of that nature has a consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And then it takes capitalistic, I don't even want to say the word because I abhor them so much. I don't abhor capitalism as such, but how they corrupt it, I do. And how they use language to keep the poor people out. It's information becomes a weapon.
You know, this is very interesting because it sort of all circles back to poetry, because poetry, talking about it, you know, because poetry is about the gesture and the sound, you know, and the rhythm. You know, these are all elements in poetry. You know, if you have a particular kind of rhythm, it conveys a whole different feeling than if you have you know, and poetry reduced, you know, to its essential components is that it's sounds, you know, it's independent sounds, it's gestures, it's rhythm. And, you know, and that is a universal language, you know, that, you know, when somebody's reading a poem, it's kind of clear that it's a poem, it's poetry that's happening. You know, it's a certain kind of essence that's being shared, you know, that you don't get with prose. It's a whole different experience, you know. So what you're saying, Jimmy, is very true about the universality of this language, this non-secret language. That's terrific. You know, Adrian.
Sir.
I want to put the spotlight back on you, man.
All right, sir.
Because what I'm going to do now, because I am an attention whore, is that I'm going to read one of your pieces from this book, La Belle Ajar, which I see all over your bookcase back there. You know. And then I want to ask you something, because I understood this was described, where I lost all my stuff here. Yeah, it's from a collection of cento poems.
Yes.
Okay. Now you just hold on to that thought, because I'm going to get the reading out of the way, and then I want to come back and I want you to explain to me what a cento poem is, because, you know, I went to college and I thought I was highly educated and stuff. And then I went, what the hell is that? What does it mean? But I love the piece. So let's read the piece, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
All right, sir.
This is called I Was Starving. Is that correct? That's what I'm reading, right?
Yeah.
Well, you hef up. I'm reading I'm Starving?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Here we go. I love food. With one exception, I splatter dripping appreciation for passionate chicken fingers. Hidden dressing, tasted salty, licked thick lips, a scalding beauty, lying in my room, tempted, hungry. Why don't you come? My eardrums ringing as he spoke wilderness into the sheets, hanging, manic, depressive. His affairs were quite scalding. He burst, bustling grapefruit juice, excited with a double-barreled sex cycle. He grooved, making blue flames. His colored fires sparked appreciative smiles. He made me dizzy. A sweet little ingenious glance, quite flattered. I couldn't help pretending to be touched by Shakespeare.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It is fantastic. You wrote it.
No, but the way you read it. All right, so you asked me what a cento poem.
What is a cento poem?
So, but basically, I'll tell you the story how this project came together. Like I told you, my mom 2 years ago, my mom had passed away, and I was dealing with I was really going through the sadness, and I was sick, and I was dealing with her estate and stuff, and I had to fly back and forth from San Antonio. So I was here, I was sick, I was in my office right here, and I was trying to figure out a way to get out of this deep depression I was in. I turned to my bookshelf, and a copy of Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar was staring at me. I picked it up, I opened it up, and I started taking words from each of the chapters of her book, and I basically started compiling and making poems out of the chapters of the prose. So basically, a cento poem is where you take lines from another poem or from another book of literature, and you create poetry out of it. So what I did is after I did the first one, which took me like 3 hours, I decided every day for 20 days for each of the chapters, I would create these cento poems from each of the chapters from the Bell Jar. And so something amazing happened while I was doing that, because I felt like in some way I was communing with Sylvia Plath. And everybody talks about Sylvia Plath being depressing and stuff because of her fate and how she took her life. The amazing thing was like she actually her words and doing this project lifted me out of this depression that I was in, this sadness. And it actually really inspired me. I felt like I was connecting with her on this really mystical level, because I heard afterwards I did a lot of research on Plath, and what I learned was that basically every time she wrote, she would have a dictionary open, and she meticulously chose every word in her prose in her poems. And it's amazing because I've tried to do this with other poets who became wrote prose, and it never worked. It's because she is so meticulous, and in the way she and her word choice is how these poems came to life. And basically, so I kind of wanted to put this project out in the world, so as an homage to this poet and writer who basically got me out of my darkness. Hopefully the other readers will want to be inspired to read more of Sylvia Plath's work. And actually at the end of the book, there's actually a recommended reading list, so people can read her work, because it's just so inspiring. And it's just basically, I kind of felt like people who like Sylvia Plath, this is like a reimagining of the Bell Jar, where it's basically trying to keep a more empowering voice to the characters and to Sylvia Plath. So it's basically my homage to her.
I was not familiar with that type of composition before. So it just struck me when I saw that is that a common thing? Is that a new thing? This practice of what you are referring to as cento?
No, it's actually been around for a long time. And actually, the amazing thing was I was at a poetry reading probably like 6 months earlier, and a poet told me that this poet had written a book where they did the same thing to Bram Stoker's Dracula, and so it kind of like planted a seed. And I went to another reading where somebody took some of the dialogue from Prince's Purple Rain and made a poem out of it. So it was like, it was in the back of my mind, and it just kind of like all came together, because at the time when I was just really, really down, I needed something, and kind of it all just came together. What I always say is like, when inspiration comes, you got to accept the charges. And you just basically have to start writing. So basically I just did it. And then it's amazing, because it's one of the things that it's like my third book. It's a book I'm most proud of, because it kind of like got me out of this deep darkness. And I feel like that sometimes that's what art and poetry and the literature is here for. It's here for you when you really need it. So I'm hoping that people will feel the same way after they read the book.
You know, I was happy to hear you say that the words that you found, the writer's words, to be very specifically chosen, you know, that it wasn't accidental. And this is something that I've discussed with Jimmy in the past as well, you know, that which I think is one of the essential components of poetry, that it is not accidental. Jimmy knows that a lot of my background has been in performing Shakespeare, in doing the classics and doing that type of language. And among actors who are familiar with the bard, you know, it's often said, you know, you don't have to work hard at it. Because a lot of people who are not familiar with Shakespeare say, I could never do that. That's so hard. It's so difficult. I don't understand it. But the fact of the matter is that when you study it, when you approach it from a poetic standpoint, and poetry, by the way, I've always believed is meant to be read out loud. Poetry is not a reading thing, it's a spoken thing. Uh-huh. And when you study the classical authors, particularly Shakespeare, you realize that, as I was starting to say, you know, people who are more familiar say, you don't have to work so hard, because he's done so much of the work for you, you know, because the words that he chose are not accidental. They're on purpose, and they're chosen not only for the imagery they convey, but also for the sound that they convey. You know, I mean, you know, you could say, apple pie, or you can say apple frittata. You know, I mean, isn't it the same thing? No, it's not. The sound is not the same. You know, so the choice that you poets make, you know, are very specific and are to be respected. And as I've said to you, Jimmy, it's my performance is not an accident if I honor the words that you have chosen and the sounds that you have chosen. So just, you know, it's really interesting to hear you, Adrian, make that observation about word choice. So we seem to be running out of time, but I have been handed here question from the audience. Well, for both of you fellas, people are curious as to, but wait a minute, before I do that, hang on a second.
Yes, definitely.
Jimmy, I do want to circle back to you because I'd like to know, you have a nonprofit as well, and you are also organizing your writer's retreat that you have every year. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's a nonprofit. We serve all communities, reservations, pueblos, prisons, schools, and we just teach people how to read and write. I mean, we bring books and we show them the world. You know, we show them, if you go into this book, you get to travel to New Zealand or to Amsterdam. And it's really cool to bring in a big load of books to a bunch of Zia Indians, you know, up on the res. And they have an aviary of eagles and hawks that have been shot or mangled or cut by the poachers. They have about 1,000 of them in a cage. Wow. One wing, 1 foot, 1 claw, right? And so when I bring all these books up to them, right? And I say, look at all these books about eagles and about this and that, right? So I enhance their Native American knowledge of books in the spiritual world that they already have with facts about where these birds. And it's so cool, man, to see these kids taking their books home, we take books, we have a book program. We give away probably $100,000 worth of books, but we believe in owning the book, not lending it to you. Even though I admire more than almost as much as I admire God, community libraries and librarians and teachers, owning the book. I gave a talk at the National Booksellers Association in Seattle, and I got up on stage as the keynote speaker and said to everybody, you need to steal the books. If you can't afford them, steal them. And the executives from New York approached me backstage after the talk and said, I cannot believe you were advocating stealing our books. That would put us out of business. I said, no. It would put everybody in business. The judges, they'd go in front of the judge for stealing books. They would be in prison for stealing books. I could go on and on and on. But yeah. The point I'm trying to say is Cedar Tree Inc. does that, my nonprofit. And we have a
That's what I wanted. The name of the organization is Cedar Tree?
Cedar Tree Inc. Go to my personal website, jimmysantiagobaca.com, and it'll direct you to Cedar Tree Inc. And you know what? We have over 200 people coming to our retreat this year, but it's going to be Zoom. But we have over 100 scholarships that we've given out. I think we have like 300 kids coming from California or something.
Okay.
Via Zoom.
Well, guys.
Thank you anyway. And yes, thank you for all that you've done. Thank you.
Guys, I have Jefa over here with the hook yanking me off. So, this has been so delightful. I wish we could go on for another hour. But I really want to thank you guys here for joining us for this wonderful experiment in the arts that we're conducting this weekend. And much love, much respect to you guys, Yeah, and everybody out there, remember that this segment was in honor of Self-Help Graphics. And if you want to support $1, $2, whatever, just go to the Virtual Arte website and click on the donate button for your particular charity. Now, 2
seconds.
I have 2 more seconds. We can't do it in 2 seconds. No. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. We will see you next time, I promise. And you have honored me because you are both so great and so good. Thank you. Keep it up.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Jimmy, for the inspiration. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos.